Hello everyone and welcome to this week's State of the Market Update with the Sultan of Sonar. Let's dive right into this market. So I've got the outbound tender volume index in the US pulled up right now. And an interesting thing that it's showing us is that even though everybody kind of has this sentiment of a cooling off market, we're really seeing higher volume levels than over here in this kind of early spring period of time where we were still kind of, I guess things were cooling off and settling down a little bit, but the idea was that the market was still pretty volatile, really active, a lot of stuff going on. I think people are anticipating produce season kicking off and whatnot. And, it didn't take very long until like mid-May and we jumped right back into it and the volumes really shot up significantly going into June, and they kind of steadily have been declining since late June. But right here, has been rather boring for a market analyst because, not a lot going on, not a lot happening. Tender rejections were sliding down in this period too as the market kind of stabilized, volumes kind of slumped off, which isn't terribly unusual as we've talked about in the past. And then here in August, where we typically see kind of an uptick, it kind of stayed subdued and even more so, but still elevated over this time period right here. So, the thought is, and you can see right now we're sitting at about 2% higher volume levels than we were back in the 1st of March. So there is some volume in the market. Now, it hasn't really translated to heated spot market activity and elevated rates or whatnot, but it has been kind of flat here in the past month and a half. And for somebody that's looking at the market every day, that might be a little boring, but at the same time, it's not terribly unusual. I know a lot of people, I've talked about it in the past where everybody kind of expects this kind of cooling off from this booming economy. And I was talking to one of our writers the other day, and he was quoting somebody famous, I can't remember who, but the bull market does not die of old age is the quote. And I thought that was rather interesting. So just because we all know that it's going to calm down doesn't necessarily mean that it's happening tomorrow or the next day. Eventually you're going to be right. We're not really seeing an evidence of that. Now, one of the things that we do think is happening, because we're not seeing this really translate to any real kind of bullish spot market activity, is this idea that, we're not seeing this huge jump in tender rejections like we saw in the middle of the year. Tender rejections, they stayed pretty subdued, even though we have seen a little bit more of a turn up here of late, coinciding with a little bit higher volume. That's not terribly unusual. We saw a big kind of bump here around the Labor Day holiday and things kind of calm back down, and now they're kind of bumping again. Is this the big jump we're looking for that going into the holidays? Is the hurricane really had a big impact? I don't think so yet. I think what we're seeing is a little bit of a ripple due to the hurricane Florence. I don't know if you guys heard about that, but that happened last week or a week and a half ago. There are still lots of areas that are flooded. They're not typically out of the woods just yet in terms of recovery. That did have a nice big impact to this area of the country. As I pull up the head haul index weekly change, new granularity available, by the way, for those of you that haven't looked in their sonar. What this is doing is measuring the change in the head haul index value over the past 7 days. And that's basically telling us that there has been either a significant reduction in inbound volume in relation to the outbound tender volume, or an increase in outbound volume in relation to the inbound volume. So we can click on the Charlotte market right here and see that it's actually, I know this because it was sitting at negative 60 or 76 last week, and it's now at a negative 44. Actually, it was at a negative 74 last week, according to the weekly change. That's what that means right there. So we've had a 30-point increase in head haul index value over the last 7 days. To kind of see that illustrated, we can go over here and look at the Charlotte market ITVI and OTVI to see who's the culprit of creating this head haul index value. So I'm going to put in the ITVI.CLT just to see, not CLY, CLT. and see which one of these is creating this kind of discrepancy. So we see that the outbound or the inbound volumes have subsided since last week is really what's happening. The outbound has come up a little bit, which is exactly what you would kind of expect. We had a lot of people kind of moving into the market as they had exited, trying to get away from the hurricane and all the floodwaters. So that market is now returning to a little bit more stable situation. When you have a lot of inbound into an area, that market stabilizes, it gets saturated with trucks. Not a lot that you can do. There's not going to be a lot of rate pressure there probably moving forward, as it now has had a big surge of inbound volume. Outbound volume starting to tick up a little bit though, so as these two numbers kind of get closer together, that's when you start to see the capacity kind of drain away. And that is about all the time we have for this week. So the market itself still kind of in a holding pattern. We do believe some capacity has returned to the marketplace as people have bought up a lot of trucks. I think that's why you're seeing this 2% increase in volume, but not necessarily the super tightening of the market that you might expect. They've just bought so many things. We can kind of illustrate that with the employment levels in trucking. I'll pull up the non-seasonally real fast just to kind of illustrate this. But this has got to have some sort of impact on what we're seeing. You can see right here, the employment levels in truck transportation are at 5, 6, probably 10-year highs. So people are adding capacity to the market. It's keeping it at a little bit more stable space. That is, we're going into the holiday period. I don't see any more hurricanes happening in the near term, and that will start cooling off dramatically as we get closer to October and in the middle of that. So again, we do have some capacity. The market is stable. Carolinas are kind of returning to normal, and that'll probably be that for this week. Again, stay tuned for more market updates from the Sultan of Sonar, and have a great week.